Hello and welcome to Who's the Bossk? It's a Star Wars podcast from laughingplace.com. My name is Mike Celestino. I am your host. I am the lead Southern California reporter and editorial director for Star Wars content at Laughing Place. This is episode number 213 of Who's the Bossk, and we will be discussing the latest episode, the sixth episode of Star Wars Skeleton Crew, the new live action series from Lucasfilm on Disney Plus. And for that discussion, I have invited back on the show my friend and fellow fan of all things film and pop culture, Justin J. Smith. Justin, how are you? Thank you for coming back on the show.
I'm great. I'm thrilled to be back. Hope you've had great holidays and you've had a happy new year.
Yeah, happy New Year to you as well. We are recording this on January 2nd. How was your holiday season?
My holiday seasons were good, and since I'm on Who's the Bossk, I should say I had a great Life Day.
Yes, I love your Life Day shirt with the whole Wookiee family there. That's wonderful. Justin, you might know as the host of a podcast called Downtown Toontown, which I have been a guest on a couple times. Justin, you and I did a whole retrospective of Steven Spielberg's entire filmography a couple years ago. And then why don't you tell them about what we talked about most recently on your show?
We talked about pretty much all the Southern California theme parks and what they do for Halloween. We focused specifically on Disneyland, of course, because that was where Judge Doom was for the Oogie Boogie. So we focused on Disney a lot, but really we covered the whole Halloween season down here in Southern California. And yeah, how appropriate that, I'd be back, while it's still fresh off of New Year's. And, we also did the Spielberg episode, and how appropriate we're talking about Skeleton Crew, which we'll get down to later.
Yes, definitely a huge Spielberg influence on this series. So this is a weird thing that popped up for you. I just was Googling your name to see what else we could talk about as I introduced you here, but I saw that you're a producer on an upcoming documentary about Howard the Duck, which I don't think I knew this before. Maybe you told me and I forgot, but it's called Howard the Doc. What's the deal with this? Is that still something that's in development? How's that coming along?
I gotta commend you, Mike. You, among your list of credits, you gotta add investigative journalist resume, because I've actually not really talked about this on social media or really to anybody I know, friend, family or so. Don't feel left out that I didn't tell you, but yeah. So basically, so we live in a very interesting world where we have the internet and filmmakers people who want to make movies. The old days, they would just try to go to Hollywood, go to the main 6 studios and try to pitch their movie and, hope it would get funded. The studios are still around, but a lot of times, people, especially independent filmmakers, are going online to places like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and a lot of the usual places to raise money from just regular people hoping to get their films made. And these filmmakers, a lot of times they're student or independent filmmakers, but also some pretty big names. Like I think Wes Anderson went to Indiegogo, and I think he credits like an Isle of Dogs, like his funders, but Kickstarter funders or whatever. Mm-hmm. Really a ton of big name filmmakers and projects have over the years. And yes, I have a background in film, and so I've sort of even myself have thrown some funding into some films over the years.
I see.
Off the top of my head, I funded filmmaking to David Lynch, The Art Life. I'm credited on that. I'm credited last year that website. I was in the new William Shatner documentary, the You Can Call Me Bill. I was credited on that, and I even got to go to the premiere / 93rd birthday party for William Shatner. He was there with Kevin Smith, was there, organizing it. But yeah, I got to go to that. And yeah, but the biggest, this one, Howard the Duck. So I have a long history with sort of infatuation with this movie, Howard the Duck.
Yeah.
You did a whole episode on it back when you were doing your Lucasfilm retrospective.
Correct. Yes.
But yeah, I remember being in third grade, they were in art class. They did a whole slideshow of like various art things like the Mona Lisa or Leaning Tower of Pisa or whatever, various collages of stuff. And the thing I was most fascinated by, one of the slides was a movie poster of Howard the Duck with the beak with the cigar popping out. And I just like laughed at just the name Howard the Duck. And after the class was, I remember going to like this teacher and like asking her, this Howard the Duck, is that a real movie? And she was like, oh yeah, it was a real movie. I think that, what's his name, Spielberg did it. She meant George Lucas, but
right.
Yes. So, and yeah, Howard the Duck, if you're have an interest in either George Lucas or Marvel Comics, it's a name that just keeps popping up again and again and again and again, because it was technically the first Marvel movie ever made.
Right.
I guess technically you can count that Captain America movie serial from the 40s, but as far as like what people today conceive as movies, Howard the Duck was the first. It wasn't Iron Man, Spider-Man, X-Men. It was Howard the Duck, and that's kind of a cool footnote. And again, it gets mentioned time to time. I remember George Lucas's Lifetime Achievement Award from the AFI. William Shatner, again, he comes up, made a very funny sort of reference to it, as a sort of roast. But yeah, I remember I've been fascinated with this movie and wanted to rent it, and finally I rented and I got a big kick out of it. So I've sort of like, it's sort of a go-to joke and sort of a reference, like Howard the Duck, so I've always wanted to, like, when I saw this documentary, I was like, oh, I have to fund it. And I went all the way because I was like, well, if I'm going to fund this, I kind of want that IMDb credit. And
nice.
I got the big one. I got the associate producer, because in a lot of the other ones, I'm just like, like I'm just a funder, and, my name's still on the credits. But this one, it wasn't too bad. And I gave enough money where I'm the associate producer. I should also add, last time we talked about, I was like president of the Glendale Film Festival. So I did also fund some projects that I also was hoping they would submit to the festival. And that was one that was thinking, well, this would be a great film to submit to the festival as well if they could, and blah, blah. So I also had that in mind, in addition to being an enthusiast. It has, last I heard, like, it hasn't really been out or released yet. I occasionally get emails once in a while, update. The last update I saw was that they finally, they were able to get Leah Thompson interviewed. They pretty much have all the big interviews except George Lucas. They couldn't quite get him. And I don't think they quite managed Tim Robbins either. But everyone else, including like the director, Willem Hayek, Phil Tippett, who's a name maybe we'll discuss later in the show.
We definitely will.
So, yeah, I was, I'm looking. Last I heard, though, they're hoping to release this for the 40th anniversary. They missed the 35th anniversary, but they're hoping to release it for the 40th anniversary, which is in 2026. So cross your fingers, because, you made films, that takes a long time, especially the post-production. So I don't necessarily begrudge them for taking a while, but I'm hoping 2026 is the year that they get. And I hope I get invited, because I even got to do like a Zoom little chat with Leah Thompson, and I didn't want to talk about Back to the Future. I brought out the Howard the Duck plushie that I bought from DCA, and I just showed her that. And so what I hope is that if I get to go to the premiere of this documentary, I run into her and give her Howard the Duck plushie for a series of photo ops.
That would be
a reunion of Beverly and Howard.
That would be pretty amazing. Yeah, that's definitely a documentary that I would watch. And yeah, hopefully it does come out relatively soon. I would love to even talk to the filmmakers. if you could put me in touch with them, or I'll look into that myself. By the time the film comes out, maybe they'll want to come on the show and promote it. I think that would be pretty fun. But I'll look forward to that, seeing completion. I had another thing I wanted to ask you about, Justin, that I forgot to put on the outline. The last time you were on the show, it was spring of 2023, I believe, and it was prior to the release of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, right? So, as of right now, I believe, now I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure you're probably the person who saw that film the most times in the theater. Would you agree with that estimation?
Well, well, I've looked on the internet because that's like our best resource. I remember a lot of like I remember you interviewed Alex Arnold. Like he only saw it
Yes.
in theaters like 15 times. Amateur stuff. I got him. I'm in quite a few of the Facebook groups and in the Instagram groups. Like I've know some Indiana Jones fans. No one has been able to beat me, but yes, I did actually see it in theater 52 times. I kind of wish you put that in the show note because I have my ticket receipt somewhere
Oh,
that I have to dig through that. But I've showed them on a couple of podcasts where I'd like here's the proof. I saw it 52 times.
you don't have to provide documentation. I definitely believe you. I guess my question about that is, listen, when Jurassic Park came out in the theater in 1993, I was 13 years old. I think I saw it 13 times. Uh, I never quite got to 50, but I guess my question to you is, why this movie? Why'd you pick Dial of Destiny to see that many times in the theater?
I love Star Wars, but I would say I'm a bigger fan of Indiana Jones. That's like I would say of all the franchises, again, and I love Star Wars. I'm a big fan of Back to the Future, which was another trilogy, and I have all sorts of fandoms, but Indiana Jones is kind of at the top, and I was looking forward to a fourth film a lot, and I did really love Crystal Skull, even though I know that film did get a backlash in its time, and there are some people who are not crazy about it. But I was looking forward to Indy 5, and it was just so maddening to me that it almost took as long to get Indy 5 as it did Crystal
Yeah.
Skull. But we finally got it. And I think the big reason was, if you remember that time, there's just so much negativity for Dial of Destiny. I think a big part of it is that it came down to Harrison Ford's age. I think a lot of people couldn't wrap their heads around an older Indy. And there were some other decisions too. I think a lot of the media, there's backlash of Indy 4 and so much like negativity like towards this movie. And I think what I wanted in the back of my head as a huge fan who's in these fan groups and has so much positivity, I wanted to like try to take over those headlines, and I was really hoping like maybe to break the world record. I wanted to like have something positive towards Indiana Jones for the media, and I was just thinking because I remember that reading that guy in Florida, he holds the world record from the Guinness Book of World Records. He saw Spider-Man No Way Home 292 times in theaters. He's
Wow.
some
Okay.
guy in Florida, and I was like, I have to try. I have to like try to beat the world record. Like think of all the good publicity this would give Dial of Destiny and Indiana Jones in general. As an indie fan, I wanted some of that good publicity. I didn't quite get 292. I didn't even quite get to 100. So in some sense, I felt like I failed. I didn't get there enough, but I've seen Indiana Jones in the Dial of Destiny 52 times, and I think that I did impress a lot of people. I dressed up almost all of those screenings, and people got really excited. So I hope I did try to do some part in like spreading the word and like saying, no, this movie's actually pretty good, and Indy is back. I mean,
Yeah.
who knows how many more times? I mean, certainly Harrison Ford. It's that who knows if he'll ever have another chance to portray Indy again.
Right.
But just seeing this movie on the big screen again, it was like I didn't want the hype to end, and that way. So that's why I just enjoyed every minute I could.
Well, I was certainly impressed by your numbers. Yeah, don't worry that you didn't match the Spider-Man person, because yeah, 52 is quite a bit. You saw it once for every card in a deck of cards.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Like the false deck,
yeah,
does play a
exactly.
role in the movie.
Yeah, there you go. By the way, we are recording this live on the Laughing Place YouTube channel. If you happen to be watching along, feel free to comment, and we'll be happy to address any questions or concerns you may have. Let's get into something called the 5 Star Wars questions. Like I said, Justin, you've been on this show once previously, so you have graduated to level 2 of the 5 Star Wars questions. Are you ready for these?
Yes.
Excellent. Number 1 of the 5 Star Wars questions, level 2. What is your favorite line of dialogue in a Star Wars movie or TV series?
The one that comes to mind that I always sort of bring up, to show my nerd fan, mostly to like normal people who don't know that much about Star Wars, because everyday Star Wars fans know this. It's Han Solo's line in A New Hope about the Millennium Falcon. It's the ship that made the Kessel One in less than 12 parsecs. Of course, I even had on my car a magnet. I made the Kessel One in under 12 parsecs.
Uh-huh.
Like I had that on the car magnet. And it's just such a great line. And I don't know if you've met Craig Miller. Have you ever interviewed him?
Yes,
Or
he's actually been on the show for like 3 minutes at Star Wars Celebration, one of the parties I interviewed him. This is probably 3 or 4 years ago now. Yeah, so very very briefly.
yeah, but anyways, yeah, he's a cool guy. But I am friends with him on Facebook. I follow his account, and he did post a really cool story about how, because he was the president of Lucasfilm marketing back in the day, and back in the old days before the internet, they got a lot of fan mail after Star Wars, and a recurring question was about how can a ship make a distance in less than 12 parsec. A parsec measures distance, not time. That doesn't make
Right.
any sense. So he actually had to go to the boss himself, George L., and he asked him, so how do you want to retcon this? Do you want to just say it was warp speed? It goes so fast it like bends like matter and time and skips over miles. And George's response was like, I didn't make the mistake. Han made the mistake.
Yeah.
Chewie is the navigator, and he's the actual smart one. Like Han is kind of the blowhard, where he's kind of like trying to pitch them this amazing ship he's got, and he doesn't. But he's a charmer, and like he's trying to be braggadocious and all that. So and I just love that story, like reading that. So. And that just sort of adds lore. Now, of course, I know they made Solo, and that sort of retcons own George's explanation.
Mhm.
But either way, that's just that's just what came to mind.
Love it. Yeah, no, that's a great one to quote. And like you said, so much fun lore behind it. Number 2, which Star Wars planet would you like to live on and why?
Well, I actually looked up what was that Empire sort of base in Rogue One with all the palm trees, and that was Scarif, I believe it's called.
Correct.
So
Yes.
yeah, because I love hot weather. I love the beach. I love palm trees. I'm not crazy about the Empire, so I would be on an Empire base, but that's sort of my go-to. The other, hot planet I could think of is Mustafar, but again,
Right.
that's Darth Vader's home planet, so maybe I'm just sort of more drawn to the dark side than I would like to admit. So, but yeah, I like hot planets, so Scarif with
Okay.
like palm trees.
But I mean, a big chunk of Scarif has been blown up by the Death Star, so probably you want to live there before that time period, I'm guessing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Did you hear
I'm
about
sure it
the
wasn't an Empire base forever.
right? Yes. Did you hear about the origins of that name of the planet name Scarif? Have you heard that story?
Enlighten me.
Okay, so apparently that name Scarif comes from when the director Gareth Edwards was in Starbucks and ordered something, and they wrote on his cup Scarif. That was their interpretation of the name Gareth. So
Uh,
that became the name of the planet in the movie. I always thought that was a funny story too. Number
that's
3, what is your favorite era in the Star Wars storytelling timeline and why. And the examples I always list off are the Old Republic, and that's thousands of years before the original trilogy. Then you've got the High Republic, which is hundreds of years before the films. The Fall of the Jedi is the prequel era. Then you've got the Reign of the Empire, which is between the prequels and the original trilogy. Then there's the Age of Rebellion, which is the original trilogy itself. The New Republic is the period where the Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett and Skeleton Crew take place. Then there's the Rise of the First Order, which is the sequel trilogy. And I also like to include the Legends timeline, which is the old expanded universe books and novels that all took place, well, mostly took place after Return of the Jedi. Of these, Justin, which appeals to you the most?
Well, I mean, I'm the big fan of the original trilogy, of course. So obviously you're tempted to say that, but I guess, in terms of like what do they offer me in terms of like living them, I guess, the High Republic, that was apparently a time, that was apparently the golden age in the Star Wars universe. So yeah, I mean, probably that, and it would be some time before it sort of unravels and the empire rises. So I guess for practical reasons, like I would be intrigued by living in the Republic, but in terms of like seeing like the movies themselves, I mean the events of the original trilogy, like the rise of the rebels and seeing them overcome the empire would be great too. But
so as a storytelling fan, you're saying that the Age of Rebellion is most interesting to you, but if you had to pick one to live in, it would be the High Republic.
Yeah, pretty much.
Gotcha. Love it. Okay, number 4. Which Star Wars creature would you choose to have as a pet?
Probably Lothcat because they're most like cats, right?
Right. Are you a cat person in real life?
Oh yeah, I have a cat. She's not here at the moment, but I have a a Siamese cat named Suki.
Ah, nice. Yeah, we have a couple cats ourselves here, so very nice. Number 5. I feel like you're going to have a good answer for this one because you're a big movie fan. What filmmaker or author would you like? So this is like, imagine you're Kathleen Kennedy and you can bring in any creative person to pitch their own Star Wars story to create either in a movie or a TV series or in a book or comic. Who would you bring in? What creative person would you like to see create their own Star Wars story?
I have a bias because last show he actually got to call in, but I would say Werner Herzog. I would love to have because of course he was infamously brought in to play quote the client in
Yes.
Mandalorian. I love Werner Herzog. I think he's one of the most fascinating public figures in film, let alone director. I mean, he's got a very interesting life story, even beyond his many like over 5 decades of film now, from
Yeah.
narrative films to documentaries. And when I was I was excited when they cast him. I was like, wow, they got Werner Herzog in a
Right.
Star Wars show. And then I noticed during an interview, he was asked, and what was especially fascinating was that this is after the show. He's doing publicity and marketing for the show, and he admits in the interview that he has never seen a single Star Wars film.
Yes.
And so I think that would be a really interesting perspective to see if they gave Werner Herzog or even someone who's never seen like we've seen George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars, create Star Wars. We've seen, and he got Irvin Kershner, who was his film teacher, and then to do Empire. And now we've had, the Disney era with people like J.J. Abrams, Rian Johnson. We've basically seen Star Wars fans get a
Right.
hold of Star Wars, but with a budget. And they've basically made fan films, but with a budget and key resources and even collaborators with like a lot of the original team who made the original movies. But we've never really seen like a Star Wars film from a guy who hasn't seen it, doesn't have an emotional connection, is sort of indifferent. So I would really like to see his take or even just someone like him, like, who his take on a Star Wars universe film would be. I think that would be quite fascinating. I mean, I would normally like say David Lynch, but he got offered Return of the
Right.
Jedi, and that's not really his thing. And I'm not sure I want to give headaches to David Lynch. So Werner Herzog would be my choice.
I think it would be super interesting to see Herzog's take on Star Wars. I think the closest thing to what you were saying would be Tony Gilroy, who is the showrunner on Andor, who isn't particularly a Star Wars fan, but
But
he did.
he
Yeah,
did see Star Wars, right?
right.
So
I
that
believe
would,
so, and yeah, he did help out on Rogue One and stuff. So he just famously doesn't really care about Star Wars. He just kind of was brought in because of his writing talents. But yeah, like you said, I think Werner Herzog is mostly unaware. Like I saw Herzog in a Q&A at I think it was the premiere of The Mandalorian. He was on a panel with Jon Favreau and the rest of the cast, and it became clear throughout the event that he thought that Jon Favreau had created the Star Wars universe. Like that was how little he knew about the franchise in general. But yeah, super cool that he's been involved in any way. In fact, like I had to get his action figure. Like just having a Werner Herzog Star Wars action figure is so bizarre, and it's something I never thought would happen in a million years. Do you have a favorite film of Herzog's?
well, I mean, so Fitzcarraldo is like really, I love that one because that's the one where they brought a 5,000-ton ship over a mountain. And like,
Yes.
it's not practical effects. They actually did it. That's like, whatever you think of him as a filmmaker or whatever, you just got like, bravo, hats off. I mean, seeing Dial of Destiny 52 times was impressive, but it wasn't 5,000-ton ship over a
Right.
mountain.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm also thinking about that other movie he did, the Aguri, The Wrath of God. Like, I think,
Mhm.
like, which is about the search for El Dorado. I was thinking about other ideas. What could his Star Wars film be? And I was like, what if he told like that story, like the search for gold, El Dorado, and like that time, but put it in the Star Wars universe? Like, I think that could be really doable, and maybe that would be his way in.
There's a documentary called My Best Fiend. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
That's his Werner Herzog's documentary about Klaus Kinski, who's
Oh,
the actor in a lot of his films, and how he has kind of this love-hate relationship with him. Super fascinating. Definitely check all those movies out. Yeah, they're all super great. Let's get into some Star Wars headlines for this week. Not a whole lot coming out this past week as far as news goes in a galaxy far, far away, mostly because of the holidays. But we did have to say goodbye. Some sad news. We said goodbye to an actor from the original Star Wars film. His name was Angus MacInnes. He played Gold Leader, the Y-wing pilot in the original Star Wars. He's in the attack on the Death Star, the Battle of Yavin. His character's name was John Dutch Vander, and he returned to Star Wars in Rogue One. Actually, he created some new lines, voiced some new lines for that character because they used archival footage of Gold Leader Dutch in the Battle of Scarif, like you mentioned before, and he got to record some new lines for that character. He's also got a nice filmography. I was going through his credits, and he's been in a bunch of stuff over the years, a lot of character part, smaller supporting roles. Were you familiar with this actor outside of Star Wars at all, Justin?
no, not I remember when I saw Rogue One and his cameo got a reaction. I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, they brought him back." I thought that was cool. I haven't watched the behind the scenes of like some of the newer Star Wars as much as I've seen the behind the scenes of the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. So I was going to ask like was that archive footage of him, but you answered that question. So
Yes. Yes, I think some of it was unused from the original film, and I don't know if they changed or altered some of the existing footage from the original film, but yeah, that information's out there somewhere. And yeah, I wasn't really familiar with his filmography either, but if you go and look in IMDb, he has a nice long list of movies that he made. So sad to see him go. I also was reading about how friendly he was with the fans at conventions and stuff would he would take photos with fans, sign autographs with fans, and he was always very, very happy to do so. So rest in peace to Angus MacInnes. Very sad to hear that news. Let's just briefly talk about a new novel that I read and reviewed. This book is actually not coming out for a couple of months. It comes out at the end of February, but I was sent an advanced copy of this, a digital file, so I could read it and tell the Laughing Place audience. I wrote a nice review of it. It's actually probably going to be up there among my favorite Star Wars novels that I've ever read. It's called Star Wars Reign of the Empire, The Mask of Fear, by Alexander Freed, who wrote the Star Wars Alphabet Squadron novel trilogy a few years ago. And this novel, The Mask of Fear, it takes place just weeks after Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And it's about how the Imperial Senate, and specifically Senator Mon Mothma and Senator Bail Organa, how these people are reacting to and trying to combat against the newly formed galactic empire. So it kind of zooms in on the political side of Star Wars, which didn't work for me so well in the prequel trilogy, but here I think it actually in novel form. This writer, he's a really good writer, this author Alexander Freed, and I thought he did a great job of bridging the gap story wise and kind of tonally between Revenge of the Sith and what we see in Andor, which features some of these characters that pop up in this novel. So again, this book doesn't come out till the end of February, but I'm putting word out there now that I really highly recommend it. I actually called it a must read in my review for Star Wars fans, and I definitely would stand by that. If you're interested at all in the political side of A Galaxy Far, Far Away, check this out. Coming very soon. Is that something that would interest you, Justin?
Yeah, I would just have to get around to actually seeing Ahsoka.
Okay.
I haven't even seen Ahsoka, and it's 2025 now, I know, but
I would say you don't even have to worry about Ahsoka, because Ahsoka wouldn't even factor into this. But Andor, definitely. Revenge of the Sith, definitely. Those are the two things that I would say are the bookends of this, where this novel takes place.
Right.
So definitely highly recommended. And then last piece of Star Wars news for this week, we had one comic book come out, and it's the continuation of the Ahsoka. Speaking of Ahsoka,
I was sort of jumping ahead, but
okay. Yeah, no problem. But this is issue number 7 of the Ahsoka comic book from Marvel, which is the adaptation of that series that you have yet to watch. But that's a good show too. I definitely recommend watching that. And then the comic adaptation is pretty straightforward. They're doing a pretty literal, almost kind of like scene for scene dialogue for dialogue adaptation. So it's not terribly different from what you saw on Disney Plus, but it's got some really nice artwork, and I would recommend that too. Okay, let's get into our main topic for this week's episode, and that is the 6th episode of Star Wars Skeleton Crew on Disney Plus, the title of which was Zero Friends Again, which is a line of dialogue again from the show. It was spoken by the character of KB, and we'll talk about her in a bit. But before we get into this particular episode, I want to ask you, Justin, before you saw any of Skeleton Crew, what did you think was what were your hopes and expectations for this series based on the trailers, based on what you knew in advance?
Well, I'd seen the trailers. I'd seen I think they had a little booth or something at D23. I think they had
Yeah.
a pop-up of Skeleton Crew. I saw that. And I was curious. As I mentioned earlier, I haven't seen Ahsoka. I haven't even seen The Acolyte. So I've sort of been drifting away from Star Wars. I
Okay.
have other interests like that other Lucasfilm property we talked about.
Sure.
But part of it is just I've had my fill of Star Wars. That was a large part of it. I kind of felt
Okay.
I've just been sort of drifting away, and there's just so much reaction in the fan community that just more sort of made me want to distance myself a little bit from it. But
Mhm.
But this show really interested me because it's set, even from the trailer we saw that it's set in suburbia. We've never really seen suburbia in Star Wars, and that sounds, maybe that's like something like small, but that's like something different we've never seen
Right.
before. It's not just setting it in another desert planet. Like, this is actually a really interesting idea, because it's like, what are these constant wars in Star Wars actually fighting for anyway? And maybe this show would be a chance to sort of answer that a little bit. And of course, I'm sure if as you've mentioned in other shows talking about the other episodes, it basically looks like homage to Steven Spielberg, with specifically The Goonies, which he executive produced. And so I was like, okay, The Goonies in space, sign me up. Could be fun. So that was sort of my attitude going into the show.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that. I think you would agree, you're a somewhat more casual Star Wars fan than I am, but you were drawn back into the franchise because of the specifics, the specific influences and look, and like you said, the uniqueness of the location, the setting of the suburban planet. So now that you've seen it, not counting this week's episode, so based on the first 5 episodes alone, previous to this week, what did you think of the show so far?
Well, the first 2 episodes, was a great experience. I got to go to the El Capitan to see it. I believe you were at Disneyland to like cover for Laughing Place. There, I went to the El Capitan in Hollywood. I have a history of that theater, including covering it for Laughing Place. I basically spent 29 hours there for them covering Marvel movies.
That's right. That's right.
But so, yeah, I went there. I actually ran into our mutual friends, Richard and Sarah. It's kind of hard for me to get away, to talk about Star Wars and not have them tangentially related. But yeah, I got to run into them and we got to catch up. And I was hoping, like most El Capitan screenings, for like a celebrity guest, or because usually before, when they have special screenings or the first screening of the week, they always have like a celebrity guest from the movie. But I think they were all at Disneyland for the PR, so there's no that. I would have even been happy if Rob Richards, the organist, came out to do the Star Wars theme on the organ. They didn't even really have him there, so that was a little disappointing. But everything else, the show was really cool. It was totally wizard. It was a really cool show. Like, it was like, we've seen The Mandalorian, which sort of did one simple thing, which was sort of take a Western show, a Western type show, and put it into the Star Wars universe. So you could see the influences from Sergio Leone and all the great Western directors. And now we've done that. And now this show is basically a pirate adventure. It's a pirate adventure. It's got, even a lot of the electric keyboard is used in the soundtrack, which a lot of movies in the 80s did following Blade Runner. But of course, it was especially prominent in the Goonies. So it's like, okay, yeah, this really is Goonies in space. And yeah, it's fun. A pirate adventure in Star Wars, something different for the series. And so I was in it from day one, and I've been catching up with it. And like with every weekend, I've been really liking the show. It's kind of hard for me to like judge them individually as episodes, because it's like, well, it's like, it looks interesting, but it's setting up. I still have to see the whole season as a whole, because it's one part of a main story. Like, it would be like judging a whole book based on the chapters. How can you like substantially review a chapter like it's its own book? So we still have 2 episodes to go, but so far, in like everything we've seen so far, I'm really liking it. I'm really liking how it progresses. This episode, there were maybe some nitpicks, or critiques maybe you could have. This episode sort of fixed a few of them, actually. And we still got 2 episodes along the way. So do you want to? Yeah, but yeah, I've been a fan of this show. I've been catching up, and this is the most. It's the most I've been really intrigued and even excited about Star Wars in a while.
Awesome. Yeah. Let's say hi to Mark here in the comments. He was excited that you called it Wizard.
Yeah,
One
it's
Mark US 79. Yeah. And he said
we said it
Amblin.
twice now on the show.
Yes.
So
Exactly. Yeah, great callback to the prequel trilogy there. And yeah, I'm pretty much right there with you as far as my thoughts on this show so far. And to kind of talk about to delve into a little bit more with what you were saying about how it's hard to judge each individual episode on its own. It's kind of this new age of television that we've moved into where each series is almost like a mini series instead of a what we think of as a television series where, you know, if you tune into the Simpsons every week, or I'm wearing a Bart Simpson shirt right now, which is why I brought that up, but it's its own little story that plays out and it concludes by the end of the episode. But yeah, these are really, like you said, chapters in a larger season long story, so it's a more serialized and harder to judge on their own merits each little episode. But this week's episode was titled Zero Friends Again. It was directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, who is, of course, the daughter of Ron Howard, the filmmaker. And he was an actor himself, grew up as a child actor. And we knew her as an actress first. I remember seeing her in The Village, M. Night Shyamalan movie. I think that was the first time I saw her as an actress. And then she has moved on to directing now. She's directed episodes of The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett. She made a documentary called Dads. I don't think she's made a feature film yet, a narrative film. So we'll look forward to her career continuing. But it's cool that she's getting all this TV work thanks to Lucasfilm and all these shows produced by Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni. And let's see, it was written by Myung Jo Wesner, who's the same writer as last week from something called High Potential. I know my guest last week explained what that was, and I've already forgotten what High Potential was. The cinematographer was David Klein, who has worked on The Mandalorian, and the editor was Andrew S. Eisen, also from The Mandalorian. So these folks are carrying over from the other Disney Plus Star Wars series. What did you think of this specific episode, Justin, coming out of Zero Friends Again?
I really liked it a lot. So I thought that what was really interesting is that this episode seemed to be maybe more character driven than some of the other shows. Like the other episodes, I should say, have been very action heavy. There was some action here, but it was a largely character. The character KB, like one of my critiques, I guess, of the previous episodes is that the character KB is kind of in the background of our 4 leads. So of these 4 leads, you know, of our heroes, we have Wim, who I guess is our main character, right?
He's our Mikey from the Goonies.
He's our Mikey. And then we have Neil, who for me is like of these 4 kids, he's my favorite of the characters. He's just, I think, you know, he really seems to be taking it off online. He's sort of got a fan base, Neil.
Yes.
And then, you know, the self-appointed leader, of course, is
Fern.
Yeah. And so KB is sort of in the background. She has those, you know, that sort of X-Men Cyclops glasses on, but we don't really know more about character. We finally get some character, but this episode fixed that. We finally get to see her fleshed out more. And I kind of liked how she stood up to Fern and like sort of pointed out her bossiness is sort of a flaw. I liked there was some tension. Yeah. And that's what I really like to see. I like to see, you know, some more development. And then she and she and Wim basically go out and have a little adventure. She sort of puts him in a tough situation, but you know, he ultimately gets to have what he always wanted, which is a moment to be the hero. And you know, as she points out to him, not as exciting, is it? So I'm like, Yeah, that's what I really enjoyed about this episode. It's like, there's some other cool special effects, and there is some action, like a big climax, but I think, having some of the more character moments and is what I really liked about this episode. And again, it sort of fixed a couple of issues I had with two of like the female characters, and this episode sort of fixed that. So I was sort of glad to have those character conflicts and interest.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely some great character stuff, great character development in this episode. And if I had to guess, I would say that's probably why they gave this episode to Bryce Dallas Howard, because she's proven on The Mandalorian that she's really good at directing like intimate character stuff. But she also is very capable with directing action, as we saw in the finale of, the climax of this episode and previous stuff that she's done. So a good all around showcase of her talents and the talents of the actors as well. I thought, each kid got their own chance to shine in this episode, but especially Kiriana Crater, who has been on this podcast before, I like to point out, and she did a great job in kind of the KB focused episode this week. So yeah, exactly. Like you, I was really glad to see her get a little bit more screen time and her brought to the forefront of the story this time around. And then let's talk about Jod. While the kids are trying to figure out how to get their ship back in this episode, Jod, the character played by Jude Law, is basically taken hostage again by the pirates that he used to be the captain. He used to be the captain of their ship, and now he's exited. He's coming out of this kind of manhole with all the treasure on him. Again, a lot of Goonies stuff popping up in this episode. They go down the slide, which was right out of the Goonies as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this was, obviously, like I mentioned, the keyboard in the soundtrack, it's mostly just
yeah.
allusions to the Goonies. It's not necessarily direct, but the opening of this episode, it's like, okay, this is exactly the Goonies.
Right.
They're not even being subtle about
Yeah,
it. It's the
yeah.
Goonies space.
Exactly. And Jod's wearing all the jewelry and the treasure that he's found in Captain Rened's lair, but he exited that manhole, and he found the pirate gang is standing there, and they take him back into custody, and he's brought in front of Captain Brutus, and he's given this thing, I guess in the pirate code, he gets equal time to kind of argue his case. And we get to hear him sing the sea shanty about pirate Captain Rened, who, by the way, I'm sure you knew, it's Donner spelled backwards,
Ah,
as in Richard Donner, the director of the Goonies.
and
um
Superman, and yeah.
yeah. So what did you think of that stuff with Jod and the pirates on their ship?
Yeah, that's a cool little I like, so the last scene of like the last episode, are sort of Jude Law, who's sort of, he's a little like, I guess you could say, to reference another pirate thing, he's a little like Jack Sparrow a little bit too. You're never
Yeah.
really sure what side he's on. And so last episode he really did a character turn and like sort of showed, okay, he's got even a more villainous touch than we sort of expected. But sort of like Jack Sparrow, this time he got sort of captured. And, I remember watching the commentary from the writers on Pirates of the Caribbean, the first one, Curse of the Black Pearl, and they said that they in part based Jack Sparrow on Bugs Bunny. He's a character who could always sort of talk himself away out of
Ah,
danger. And so that's sort of what Jaw does here in this one. He's sort of, they're ready to execute him. And again, he sort of knows these pirates, and, he knows that pirates can never turn down the opportunity to access their treasure. So he sort of spares his life and sort of talks his way out of it. And it kind of reminded me of that moment from the commentary. It's like, okay, it's a little bit of a Bugs Bunny, Jack Sparrow thing going
yeah,
for him.
absolutely. I also wanted to point out that one of the pirate characters is named Snobbius Snee, and he's voiced by the comedian John Hodgman, who I knew from The Daily Show. decades ago. I don't know. And he's been a character actor in a bunch of stuff over the years. He's also been a voice actor in a lot of cartoons, but I'm a big fan of his. He's written really funny books. He's just a really funny guy. He has his own podcast called Judge John Hodgman. But if you're a fan of his, he has like 2 lines in this episode. But I just thought it was a fun cameo voice appearance by John Hodgman. Let's talk about the stop motion animation. Now, you mentioned Phil Tippett
Of
earlier,
course.
who, of course, has
I actually
worked.
did watch the credits, and I noticed Phil Tippett Studios was credited in the
Yeah.
credits, so I was definitely gonna bring it up if you didn't, but of course you're gonna bring it
Okay.
up.
Of course. Yeah. So Phil Tippett very famously worked for Industrial Light and Magic during the original Star Wars trilogy. He was credited, and we've seen photos of him performing, uh, animating the AT-AT or AT-AT walkers in The Empire Strikes Back. I think he also did the Tauntaun. He did a lot of stuff in Return of the Jedi, a bunch of other stuff for Lucasfilm and ILM. His again, another person whose IMDb credit list goes on, his filmography goes on forever. You've seen so much of his work over the decades that he's been in the visual effects industry, and he founded this company, Tippett Studio. They also worked on The Mandalorian. They contributed some stop motion stuff to that show as well. But
Book of
here they
Boba
were responsible for what's that?
And what about the Book of Boba Fett that has that big monster at the end?
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah, they also
Rancor.
did.
Rancor.
Was it the Rancor? Did they do the Rancor? Yeah. So yeah, they've been involved with these recent live action Star Wars series as well. And here in this episode, they were responsible for this giant crab. They call it the mama crab, but its little like nickname or name, I guess, is Tetanus. TET apostrophe NISS, which I'm sure is a reference to the fact that it's got all these jagged metal pieces on its back, and you would probably get a bacterial infection if you touched it. I thought this thing looked really cool. I actually wanted to see more of it. It's not on screen for a terribly long time. What did you think of that creature, Justin?
Yeah, it was cool, but since he's a giant crab, I think a lot of people are comparing him to Tamahoa, the crab from
Tamatoa,
Moana.
yeah.
Toa,
Yes.
the crab from Moana. So I mean, I don't know if that was inspired or had anything to do with why he wasn't in it more, but yeah, I mean it's hard not to make that comparison.
Right. Yeah, a big giant crab who collects junk. Both Tamatoa and Tetanus. Lucasfilm also released a video today with an interview with one of the designers from Tippett Studio, talking about the detail that went into the design of Tetanus and the little Easter eggs they built in. Apparently, they put in a little R2D2 on its back. There's a little C3PO and a little K2SO droid as well from Rogue One. And the caption of that Instagram post implied that you can also see the Millennium Falcon somewhere on the back of this crab. But yeah, always like to see them go back to these kind of older methods of creature creation, whether it's a practical puppet on set or they go into this, stop motion animation, which has such a long and storied history in Hollywood and fantasy filmmaking. I don't know. Do you have a particular fondness for stop motion, Justin?
Oh yeah, I actually got to go to the world premiere of the newest Wallace and Gromit movie, which is stop, claymation. So
Yes.
grew up on that, Nightmare Before Christmas, and and I love a good stop motion. And of course, Phil Tippett, of course, is one of the guys from Star Wars. I mean, he designed the Dejeric chess set. I mean,
Right.
cool is that? Those, it's not in it very long, but I've always wanted to play that game sort of thing. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm a big fan of stop motion, and so I always love to, every time I see it, it sort of stands out from everything else that's like being made, and because it's so labor inducing to do
Yes.
stop motion. That's I'm almost amazed now that we see it as much as we do today. There's like the that studio like Kia, like they have a
Yes.
whole studio dedicated to stop motion movies, and I'm amazed that they still continue on with the money and all that and the labor. But yeah,
Right.
I always like to see it, and yeah, I'm happy to see it implemented here. That was a highlight. I think they've gotten that to the point where they have a good blend of having practical effects and also the modern, CGI effects, whether it's using the volume or whatever. So I think they've gotten to a point where they're getting a nice balance.
Right. No, I totally agree. And yeah, I would say these days there might be more stop motion animated features coming out, at least in Western cinema, than we get like traditional hand drawn animated features. I think that that might be the case, which I never thought that would happen.
That is crazy to think about, but the interesting thing is that stop motion is actually older than hand drawn animation.
That's
So
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's just something really interesting to think about. That we think it's kind of you know I think people think of like hand drawn as being old because I guess
Mhm.
those old classic Disney movies, the Snow Whites and Pinocchio, are like getting to like 70, 80 years old and
Yeah.
60. So but like stop motion, and stop motion, people's first exposure, I guess, is largely the 60s with that Rankin and Bass stuff. But actually it goes back to the silent film era. And so the fact that there's still such longevity for this art form is
Yeah.
really promising to see. And I guess, because it kind of resembles live action, like it doesn't, people don't necessarily think of it as like, oh, this is like, it doesn't stand out the same way a physical hand drawn animation does.
Yeah, and I bet most people who saw this creature in Skeleton Crew thought it was
CGI,
CGI. Yeah.
because it's
Uh,
getting hard to tell because CGI is
and
getting.
Yeah, and that's why it's great when they put out these behind the scenes kind of featurettes talking about how this stuff was created. Really cool to see that. Any other highlights? Let's talk about the climax here because um, there's almost kind of like a Toy Story 3 kind of thing where they're about to be eaten by this giant incinerator, and then Fern presses the whole destruction button or whatever, and the
Mhm.
ship breaks apart. The ship, the onyx cinder, it turns out, has this outer shell that is capable of being removed or disposed of, and then there's like a sleeker, cleaner ship on the inside that has half as many engines. I was kind of bummed because I have the Lego onyx cinder and it doesn't do that, but they'll have to make another set. But yeah, what did you think of the climax of this episode in general?
Yeah, well, I remember him warning, "Never, don't ever press that button." So
Yeah,
I'm glad we finally got to see it paid off. And yeah, it was a really cool way to end the show. One thing that you meant, like I guess we're talking about destruction. One thing I hope we get to mention is what about 33? We saw he got shot in this episode. I
yeah.
want to know, is he gonna come back?
I would be shocked if he doesn't come back.
Yeah.
But yeah, he did get he got the ion blast again, so he's been deactivated. But I'm sure we'll see SM-33 before these final two episodes. By the way, I think I did enjoy this episode, but to me it felt like, oh, this is the one where they're kind of getting all the pieces in the right place for the big finale. So there's two episodes left. I'm thinking it's going to be kind of like a two-part series or season finale for Skeleton Crew, and this episode was really just kind of building up to that. But I did enjoy it for what it was. Was there anything that you didn't care for when it came to this episode of Skeleton Crew, Justin?
Everything we've seen in this episode was really good. But one thing I guess that, I guess that's sort of in the background that we haven't seen. So not so much what we've seen, but what we haven't
Yeah,
seen is there's still a lot of like the parents we haven't seen. And I
right.
know this is like sort of like the Goonies, and the Goonies, they the whole appeal of that was that they got to go on this adventure away from the parents, and that we saw the parents early on and then we didn't see them until the very end where they hug and reunion again, because they almost lost their kids and all that. So but yeah, this time we see a little, it was hinted at more, and like after they leave for their adventure, we see the parents a little bit in conference, and then we have another scene where he sort of, I think this was like last episode, where he breaks into the system, and then it was Fenn's mother sort of helps out the Wim's father and all that consulting. So we're seeing a little more scenes, but they're in theory, like when the first two episodes, I was wondering, are they going to sort of cut back and forth between the kids going on this adventure and like the parents trying to track them down? And they don't do that quite as much, thankfully. Like, I think obviously the focus is the kids, but there's not as much of the parents that I was wondering if we were going to see. So I'm sure, obviously we got 2 episodes to go. They have to also explain a lot about Atten and why is it hidden? Like, why is it so separated from the rest of the universe? And of course, I'm sure it'll all be revealed in the grand finale, but that's sort of like the big question of this whole show. So so those are, I guess, the only thing I'm not caring about is that, well, we should be learning a little more about Atten, but again, it goes back to my previous point. It's like it's hard to really judge a chapter on its own. So
definitely agreed. Well, as it stands right now, we know that the pirates are headed toward Atten because Jod has the coordinates that he got from the layer, and the pirates want to see if the treasure is really there. And then we know the kids, because KB has the coordinates stored in her memory, they've taken off in the ship, so they're headed there as well. They're on a collision course for wackiness, and I'm sure they'll both arrive there, and I'm sure we'll see more of the parents coming up next week as all the characters reconverge back on at Atten. Very excited to see the next 2 episodes of this show. Anything else that you would like to say about Skeleton Crew before we move on here, Justin?
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground. I'm just really enjoying the show, and I'm eager to see next week's episode. I'm not sure what more to say. I really like it.
Me too. Yeah, no, I'm same here. Let's get into our final segment here on Who's the Bossk. It's called First Steps into a Larger World. This is where we talk about the media that we've been consuming and or enjoying outside of Star Wars. I think you'll appreciate my example this week because there was a book. It's like a kind of like a coffee table book that came out a couple years ago, and I was like, I need this book. I have to own it, because it's a behind the scenes book about one of my favorite movies ever made. It's written by Lee Unkrich, who's a big Pixar guy, directed a bunch of Pixar movies, and along with J.W. Rinsler, who is very famously accomplished behind the scenes journalist. He's written books about the making of the Star Wars trilogy, both trilogies, the prequels and the original trilogy. He's done the Indiana Jones trilogy. He's done a bunch of stuff for Lucasfilm and other movies, going behind the scenes of other films. Unfortunately, J.W. Rinsler has passed away, but in the time since he sadly died from cancer a few years ago, Lee Unkrich has finished the book and released it. Unfortunately, the original version of this book was like $1,500. So it was a little out of my price range, but the great thing about it is the company that put it out, Taschen, finally made a more affordable version of it. It's smaller, it's more compact. It doesn't have all the like bells and whistles of the bigger version, but you get most of the same content, and you can read it and enjoy the work that these two authors put in to documenting the behind the scenes of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. I don't think I've said the title yet, but yeah, I love the movie. I'm obsessed with the movie, and I have started reading this. I'm not terribly far into it, but I'm really loving what I have read so far, and I'm learning a lot. Stanley Kubrick is such an enigmatic and fascinating figure on his own, but yeah, The Shining is possibly his most analyzed movie, maybe even outside of 2001. I don't know. It could be, it's a tight race between those two. But yeah, this is highly recommended from me already. Just the photos alone, because these guys dug up all these behind the scenes photos that have never been released before from the family of Danny Lloyd, who played the little kid, who played Danny, uh, in the movie. And his family took a lot of Polaroid photos on the set of all the actors and the filmmakers creating this film. So I'm just digging in. I got it for Christmas, and I'm loving it so far. It's much more affordable right now, so you can go and check that out at Tashin's website. How about you, Justin? What have you been watching, reading, playing? Anything lately that you'd like to talk about?
Uh, well, the end of the year just happened. I saw Gladiator 2, which I've been meaning to see. The first movie of the year was sort of Chicken Run 2, another stop motion film,
Okay.
Dawn of the Dead. And then the last film was I saw of 2024 was Gladiator 2. And I guess the one thing that links them both is that they're perfectly fine if completely unnecessarily long distance sequels from movies from the year 2000 of all things. So
Weird.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, the ending was pretty good. I don't think it is very slow at the beginning. I don't know. I don't, I think a problem with a lot of these legacy quills is that the offspring of our heroes are never as interesting as our
Right.
heroes, as our characters. So I think that was sort of hard to overcome. But, it was watchable.
Okay. So
Yeah.
watchable for Gladiator 2.
Yeah.
We tonight we are going to go see Nosferatu. Have you seen that yet?
Oh yeah, I saw that on Christmas. Really, good film. I like Robert Eggers a lot of the
Me too.
director. My favorite is The Lighthouse. I think that's his best film. This film it's a remake of a classic film, and they also made a remake in the 70s by who else? Werner Herzog. So
Yeah.
keep wheeling it back to like things we
Yeah.
talked about earlier. But yeah, Nosferatu was a pretty cool little horror film. It's probably, well, I say little, but it's got big sets. It's probably his biggest profile film to date, even more than the North film. And so if you like Robert Eggers, I think you'll really like it, even if it's a story we're familiar with. It's Nosferatu, which is Dracula.
Yeah, I'm a huge Robert Eggers fan myself. I love The Witch. I love The Lighthouse. I really like The Northman. It's probably his most like conventional film, but it's still really well made. And I'm super
This
looking.
might be
Yeah,
more conventional just
yeah,
because it is a remake and it's Dracula, which is
yeah,
maybe not everyone's seen a Dracula adaptation, but everyone knows a Dracula.
yeah.
So there is that, but there's still a lot to admire.
Okay, I'm sure I'll be talking about that next week on the show. By the way, on the next episode of Who's the Boss, we will be talking about Star Wars Skeleton Crew episode 7. So come on back to check that out. In the meantime, I want to send out a big thank you to my guest this week, Justin J. Smith. Justin, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking with me about Star Wars again. Where can people find you on the internet if you want them to find you? Where would you like to send people?
Obviously, there's the Instagram page, JJ Smith Entertainment. One thing I didn't mention last time I was on your show that I feel like
Okay.
I need to mention now is my YouTube page, JJ Smith Media, which finally cracked the 1,000 subscribers. So
Nice.
very happy about that. I've had a page for like it feels like a decade and a half, but for a lot of years I never really took it seriously. I've only been really posting a lot of stuff for like the past 4 years, 3 years. So I'm finally at like 1,000. I don't know. I don't see myself being a huge YouTuber, but you never know. I'm happy with 1,000, but I want more. So look on some of my videos, subscribe to the
What kind of stuff are you doing on the YouTube channel?
Well, I've uploaded my podcasts on the
Okay.
channel, but really that's maybe a reason. It's kind of a hodgepodge of things because I'm at Disneyland a lot, so I posted several ride-throughs and like even shorts of like various things in the park, at both parks. I've also did a whole entire video last year that I worked on because we talked about Indiana Jones. I actually, and a bunch of Indiana Jones fans, got to visit Lucasfilm last year, and I sort of made a trip report video that sort of
Okay.
chronological, all that in detail. So I've got trip reports, ride throughs. I got sort of joking videos. I try to do it all, so I even posted a couple of movies on there. So,
Okay.
mostly, ones I could actually show that, can't really be stricken by copyright, but I got quite a bit, usually my interests are Southern California / Disneyland / movies and entertainment.
On that trip to Lucasfilm, I think I saw on some post that you put up on social media somewhere. Did you guys visit the building that was used as the Berlin airport in
Oh
Last
yeah.
Crusade? Yeah,
We went to all the locations that were
nice,
used in Indiana Jones. We went to Indy's house from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
nice.
We actually got to hike to try to find we found the in Mount Tamalpaico, I think it's called, where basically we try to find the Last Crusade motorcycle chase, all the
Oh,
exterior for that. We went to Chinatown, which was used as B-roll footage or for the Temple of Doom. We went to the airport used in Temple of Doom, the Shanghai 1935 airport.
okay.
So we also went to the Oakland Aviation Museum, which is where Raiders is the plane that he boards at in Raiders. We actually got to tour that, and fun fact, they even have that plane is open for like birthdays and parties. I don't think it's full house, but if you like call them, I think you can rent it for like 10 people, and maybe you could screen Raiders there. So yeah, we did all this all the locations related to Indiana Jones, and but the highlight was getting to walk that magical Lucasfilm, you know, Lucasfilm headquarters. That was exciting. Industrial Light and Magic. And I even got
Nice.
to see my favorite part of that whole museum, the Lucasfilm, was seeing steamroll Judge Doom. Like, I saw he was hanging on the bathroom on Twitter.
Yes.
They moved him. Now he's like with a bunch of other Roger Rabbit stuff, but he was there, and that made me really excited.
Yeah, I've done the tour at ILM myself, and it was such a thrill to see all that stuff. Uh, I had no idea that that motorcycle chase from Last Crusade was filmed in Northern California. I thought that was in Europe somewhere. So
Yeah,
they convinced me. Yeah.
yeah. There is definitely a lot of I think like the beach where they're at in Last Crusade was shot in Spain. There was Spain, but like the actual motorcycles chase was
Okay.
actually filmed at that trail. One guy and myself actually sort of temporarily got split up from the group because we were hiking trying to find all the exact shots. So that was an adventure all in and of itself. But yeah, that was a really fun trip in San Francisco. And yeah, if you want to learn more about
Yeah.
that video, that video is on my YouTube page along with some Indiana Jones stuff and a lot of other stuff. So JJ Smith Media, YouTube it,
Yeah.
Instagram Threads. I'm posting a lot now, which is basically an extension of Instagram on Twitter, but Instagram sort of extension of Twitter, now X. But yeah, I'm now posting a lot on that all of a sudden. So that's pretty much the go-to places, I think.
Great. It seems like you've been up to a lot of really fun stuff. I enjoy following you always on Instagram as well. So thanks again for coming on the show and sharing all that with me. As always, please visit laughingplace.com for all your Disney news and opinions. I'm on Instagram as well at Who's the Bossk Pod, so you can follow me there. I just visited the Ghostbusters locations in downtown LA. You can see my photos there. Every once in a while, I like to go to that hotel, the Biltmore, where they shot the hotel scenes in the original Ghostbusters film. My name is Mike Celestino. And I want to thank you out there if you're listening to the podcast or if you're watching and commenting live on the Laughing Place YouTube channel. See you next time. May the force be with you, and we'll see you real soon. Thanks again. Bye.